It was supposed to be just another weekend getaway. Some fresh air, a few cold beers, and a couple of days to disconnect from the world. I'm Jack, 32, a corporate drone who needed a break. A few friends, Tom, Chris, and Lisa, had the same idea. We'd rented an isolated camping site, nestled deep in the woods of northern Idaho. You know, the kind of place where cell service is practically non-existent, and the nearest town is miles away. A perfect spot for some quiet, uninterrupted time in nature. We arrived late afternoon, just as the sun began to dip behind the trees, painting the sky in an eerie shade of red. Our spot was a tiny clearing near a small creek. It was peaceful, too peaceful. It felt like something was watching us from the shadows. The trees seemed to bend and whisper in the breeze, but I brushed it off as nothing more than the wind. The moment we set up camp, a sense of unease settled in, but again, I chalked it up to exhaustion. The day had been long, and the air felt heavier than usual, like it was full of secrets. We built a fire, cracked open the beers, and tried to relax. Tom was the first to notice something odd. "Did you guys hear that?" he asked, eyes darting to the tree line. "What?" I said, trying to keep things light. "Listen. It's like footsteps, but not from any animal I know." We all fell silent. For a moment I thought I heard it too, a faint crunching sound, like something or someone was moving through the underbrush. But there was no one there. No other campers, no wildlife. Just the sound of the wind and the crackling fire. "You're hearing things?" Lisa chuckled, trying to break the tension. But even she didn't seem convinced. We tried to laugh it off. But when night fell, the sounds returned. They were unmistakable. Soft, deliberate steps around the edge of the camp. Slow, like whoever or whatever was out there was studying us. Tom got up to check, but as soon as he stepped away from the fire, the sounds stopped. It was like the woods went dead silent. I didn't want to admit it, but I was scared. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Tom!" I called out, my voice shaking slightly. Nothing. I called again, louder this time, but still no response. That's when panic set in. The fire flickered erratically, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally. We all stood frozen, trying to make sense of what was happening. Then, without warning, a blood-curdling scream split the night. Tom's voice, or what I thought was Tom's. We rushed toward the sound, hearts pounding, the world around us now terrifyingly silent except for our frantic footsteps. The scream echoed again and we followed it. But when we reached the spot where it had come from, there was nothing. Just a dark patch of trees and the quiet creek we had crossed earlier. No sign of Tom. We searched for what felt like hours. It felt like the woods were playing tricks on us, distorting everything. Just when I thought I might lose my mind, Lisa found something. Something small, barely noticeable in the moonlight. A torn piece of clothing. Tom's jacket. My blood ran cold. Why was his jacket here so far from the camp? And why didn't he come back? I turned to Chris, who had gone pale. "We need to leave," he whispered. But I knew deep down we were already too far gone. That's when the second scream came. Fainter this time, but unmistakable. Came from deeper in the woods. And it was closer than before. We froze, all of us. The scream echoed through the trees, sharp and terrifying, like it was coming from somewhere far off but somehow right next to us at the same time. I could feel the blood drain from my face. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But where to? The woods stretched on endlessly in every direction. "Did you hear that?" Lisa's voice was barely above a whisper, barely audible over the pounding of my heart. "Yeah, I heard it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But it's not Tom. That's something else." Chris, who had been the most reluctant to go into the woods in the first place, was the first to react. "We need to get out of here, Jack. Right now. No more waiting around." I wanted to agree, but something kept me rooted to the spot. Call it curiosity, or maybe it was just the fear that if we left now, we'd never find Tom. But I wasn't ready to give up on him just yet. "We can't just leave him," I said, my voice trembling, but determined. "He's out there. We need to help him." We started moving toward the sound of the scream, hoping to find some clue about what was going on. But the closer we got to the heart of the forest, the more wrong everything felt. The trees were thicker, the air colder. It didn't feel like we were walking through nature anymore. It felt like we had crossed into something different. The usual sounds of the forest, rustling leaves, distant animal calls were gone. There was only silence now, an oppressive, unnatural silence that weighed on us like a 100-ton stone. Then we saw it, a figure standing in the distance, just on the edge of the trees. First, I thought it was Tom, but something about it was off. The figure was too still, too rigid, and as we crept closer, the moonlight revealed something else. Its face was hidden in shadow, its body unnaturally twisted, like it wasn't quite human. I stopped dead in my tracks. Is that? Lisa's voice trailed off. I don't know, I whispered, too afraid to even blink. But that's not Tom. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, staring at us through the darkness. The air grew colder still, and I could see my breath in front of me, despite the warmth of the night just hours before. Stay back, Chris warned, pulling Lisa closer to him. I don't trust it. I wanted to turn around, to run, but I couldn't. Something in me wanted to know what was happening here. I felt like I was being drawn into the forest, like the trees themselves were pulling me closer. We took another step forward, and suddenly, the figure turned. Its movement was unnatural, jerky, like a puppet on strings. The thing's head twisted around in an impossible angle to face us, and in that instant, I felt my blood freeze. The thing wasn't wearing Tom's clothes, but the figure seemed to have some sort of dark, torn fabric wrapped around its body. Its face was covered in dirt, but even in the dim light, I could see its eyes, deep, hollow pits that looked as if they had been carved into its skull. And its mouth, it opened impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth that seemed to stretch on forever. That's when I finally understood. It wasn't human, not by a long shot, and it wasn't alone. Suddenly, from behind the first figure, more shapes emerged from the shadows, twisted, grotesque things that moved in the same unnatural, jerky way. The air was filled with an awful, low growl that seemed to reverberate through the ground beneath our feet. I knew at that moment we had made a terrible mistake by staying. These things, whatever they were not of this world. The ground beneath us shook, and one of them lunged. "Run!" I screamed. Without a second thought, I turned and ran, Lisa and Chris close behind. The forest was no longer our ally. It was a maze, and we were lost in it. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I saw one of the figures darting behind us, its twisted form vanishing between the trees before reappearing just ahead of us. But we couldn't outrun them. We couldn't escape the woods. I heard a scream, and when I looked, Lisa was gone, just vanished into the night. "Lisa!" Chris shouted, his voice broken. But he didn't stop running. Neither of us stopped. We ran for what felt like hours, the sound of those creatures following us the whole time, never fading. My chest burned from the exertion, my mind a blur of panic and terror. Eventually, I felt something sharp hit me in the back. A stone, a branch, I don't know what. I fell to the ground, rolling, trying to push myself back up, but I couldn't. The fear was choking me, drowning me. When I looked up, Chris was gone. Just like that. I was alone now, and whatever had been hunting us was closing in. I don't remember much after that. The panic, the exhaustion, everything blurred into one terrifying haze. I stumbled through the trees, my heart pounding in my ears, my breath ragged and uneven. But no matter how hard I tried to escape, I could feel them closing in. Their presence was suffocating, a crushing weight I couldn't escape. I remember crashing through the underbrush, my legs giving way as I fell to my knees. I tried to scream, but my voice was barely a whisper in the vast, empty night. There was no sound except the wind, and the distant, mocking call of someone laughing. I managed to pull myself to my feet, heart hammering in my chest, and stumbled forward in a daze. That's when I saw the light. It wasn't far, a flickering glow in the distance. I thought for a moment I might be imagining it, but the closer I got, the more real it became. It was the fire from our camp, still burning, though it seemed impossibly far from where we had set up earlier. I ran toward it, desperate, hoping for some shred of familiarity in this nightmare. When I reached the clearing, I froze. The camp was still intact, at least it looked that way. The tent, the fire pit, the backpacks, all of it. But it wasn't the camp I remembered. Felt wrong. The air was thick, oppressive, like the very ground was waiting for something. And there, sitting by the fire, was Tom. I gasped, taking a step forward. "Tom?" My voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. He looked up at me, and for a split second, I thought I saw something like relief in his eyes. Then the moment passed. His face twisted into a hollow, emotionless expression. "You shouldn't have come back, Jack," he said, his voice distant. "They're not gonna stop. No one is getting out of here." "Tom, what the hell is going on?" I rushed to him, but as I got closer, I saw the truth. Tom wasn't Tom anymore. His skin was pale and stretched tight over his bones, his eyes sunken deep into his skull. His mouth hung slightly open, like he was trying to speak, but there was no life behind his words. His body jerked slightly, like it was being controlled from somewhere deep within. "What is this?" I backed away slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. "What the hell did they do to you?" "They take us," he muttered, his voice weak and broken. "One by one, they take your soul. Keep it locked inside them. You become part of them, part of the woods." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind couldn't process it. None of this made sense. But before I could ask him more, I felt it. A shift in the air. The temperature dropped even further, and the shadows surrounding the camp seemed to grow deeper, more alive. I turned and looked into the forest, my blood running cold. They were here. I didn't know how I knew it, but I did. The air felt thick with them, as though they were watching, waiting. Without warning, Tom stood up, too fast, too jerky, his body moving like a marionette. He stepped toward me, and I could see now that he wasn't moving on his own. Whatever had taken him was using him as a vessel, and it wasn't alone. I tried to run, but the woods had turned against me. The trees seemed to close in, their branches reaching down like claws, grabbing at my clothes, pulling me back. The ground beneath me became soft, like it was trying to swallow me whole. I kicked and fought my way free, but it felt useless. The darkness was swallowing me, inch by inch. Then I saw it. From the shadows, someone stepped forward. It wasn't like Tom, but it wasn't human either. Its eyes gleamed with an unnatural, malevolent light. Its mouth split open to reveal rows of sharp teeth. Its skin stretched tight across its bones. It grinned at me, and I felt a cold shiver of terror run through my veins. "You shouldn't have come," it whispered, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "You're too late." I felt a wave of dread rush over me. Too late, the creature advanced, its movements unervingly smooth and quick. And then, just as it reached for me, the ground beneath me cracked open, sending a sharp tremor through the earth. For a split second, everything stopped. In the next instant, I was falling. Down into the earth, my body tumbling through the darkness, the air growing colder, the sound of those terrible things fading behind me. I landed hard, but I didn't feel the impact. I was numb, completely disconnected from my body. I couldn't even bring myself to scream. But as I lay there, surrounded by the suffocating darkness, I could hear something. A whisper. No, not a whisper. A voice. "Welcome to the others." The voice echoed through the blackness, reverberating in my skull like a drumbeat. I couldn't move, couldn't even think straight. All I could hear was that voice, low and haunting, wrapping itself around me like a thick, suffocating fog. "Who's there?" I finally managed to croak, my voice barely more than a whisper. My chest felt tight, like I was suffocating. I couldn't see anything, no light, no shapes, just that oppressive, unyielding darkness. And then, something shifted. The air around me seemed to breathe. I didn't know how to explain it, but it felt like the very ground beneath me had come alive. The silence was broken by the faintest rustle, like someone or something was moving in the darkness. My heart hammered in my chest as I strained my ears, waiting for the next sound. A soft, slow clap. I tensed. Another clap, closer this time. Louder. Then, more voices. Hollow, disembodied. Each one laughing softly. The sound was unbearable. My nerves screamed for release, but I couldn't make myself move. The weight of the darkness, of whatever was here, pressed down on me, suffocating, crushing. And then, just as quickly as it started, it stopped. Everything went silent, dead silent. I didn't know how much time had passed, but I felt a shift, a presence in front of me, something moving closer. And then, finally, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, too tall, its body unnaturally thin, its features obscured in darkness. But what terrified me the most was the sound. A scraping, screeching noise, like metal dragging against stone. It made my teeth rattle. The figure stepped forward, and I saw it clearer now. A face, or what was left of one. Hollow eyes, sunken and empty, staring straight into me. Its mouth opened wide, impossibly wide, revealing rows upon rows of sharp, jagged teeth, each one gleaming in the faint, sickly light that seemed to emanate from nowhere. "You've joined us?" it whispered, its voice a guttural rasp, like it hadn't spoken in centuries. "You're one of us now." I recoiled, my heart thundering in my chest. "No, I'm not like you. I'm human." The figure laughed. It was a sound that made my skin crawl, a laugh that felt so ancient, so wrong. It sent shivers down my spine. Human? No one leaves. Not once they've seen what we are. Not once they've crossed the line. I couldn't understand. What line? What did it mean? It was as if everything I thought I knew about reality had cracked wide open, revealing something twisted, something beyond comprehension. The figure stepped closer, its cold breath brushing across my face, sending chills through my body. I could feel the hunger radiating off it, an insatiable desire that made my stomach turn. "You're here because you belong," it said, its voice dripping with malice. "You were always meant to join us. The woods have a way of finding those like you. Those who are lost." "Lost? What do you mean? I don't belong here," I shouted, desperation lacing my words. "I just want to get out of here. Please, I just want to go home." The figure paused, its gaze unblinking, its head tilting to the side in an almost curious way. It studied me for a long, excruciating moment. I could feel its cold, empty eyes digging into my soul, peeling away the layers of fear and confusion that had built up. "You don't get it, do you?" it said softly. "You never left. You're still in the woods, Jack. You're still here. It's only a matter of time before you become one of us." My heart sank. What was it saying? I didn't understand. But before I could protest, the darkness shifted again. It wasn't just that one figure anymore. There were more, so many more. The shadows around me moved, and I could see them now. More of them. Their bodies distorted, broken, twisted beyond recognition. Some of them still wore bits of clothing that looked familiar. Tom, Lisa, Chris, they were all here. I took a step back, my breath shallow, panic rising in my chest. They were trapped, just like me. No, I won't be one of you," I cried out, my voice hoarse. But it was too late. They began to close in on me, their movements jerky, erratic, like puppets on strings. And in that moment, I understood. These things weren't human. They never had been. They were the remnants of those who had come before me, the ones who had lost themselves to the darkness of the woods, the ones who had seen what was here and never left. They were the others. "You can't escape it, Jack," one of them hissed, its face twisted in a grotesque grin. "None of us can." The others gathered around me, their hollow eyes boring into me as they spoke in unison, their voices rising together in a terrifying chorus. "You're already ours." The air turned thick, suffocating. I could feel my body growing weaker, my vision swimming. They were right. There was no escaping. I was already one of them. And then, everything went black. When I opened my eyes, the world had changed. At first, I thought I was dreaming. My body felt heavy, like I was lying in a thick, viscous fog. But then I realized that I wasn't just lying down. I was sinking. The ground was soft beneath me, as if the earth itself was swallowing me whole. I tried to move, but my limbs were stiff, unresponsive, like they no longer belonged to me. Panic rose in my chest. What's happening to me? I forced myself to sit up, the air around me thick and suffocating, like it was made of some other substance. Something alien, something wrong. My body felt wrong. I looked down at my hands, and they weren't mine. My skin was pale, stretched tight over my bones, just like those things. The same colorless, lifeless hue. My nails were long and sharp, and when I looked closer, I saw that the skin was beginning to peel at the edges, as if it was shedding. I was changing. No! My voice cracked, barely audible. But it wasn't my voice. It sounded hollow, empty, like I was no longer speaking from my own body. A sharp, cold laugh echoed through the darkness around me. It was the same haunting laugh I'd heard before. The thing, the one who had spoken to me, stepped forward, its twisted form moving with unsettling grace. "You've finally realized, haven't you?" it whispered. "The transformation is already happening. You're becoming one of us." I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight it, to tear myself away from whatever force was controlling my body. But I couldn't. The darkness was all around me, pressing in, holding me down. Every part of my body screamed for escape, but I was trapped, caught in the process of becoming something I couldn't comprehend. I tried to push myself to my feet, but the ground beneath me was soft and shifting, like it was made of living, breathing things. My feet sank deeper with every movement, and the weight of the earth was pulling me down, like it was trying to claim me, to take me completely. "I told you, Jack," the creature hissed, its voice low and cruel. "You can't leave. Not now. Not ever." I could feel something else, something stirring inside me. Not just the fear, but hunger. It wasn't like the hunger I had known before. This was something more primitive, more terrifying. It gnawed at the edges of my mind, a constant, insatiable craving. "Feed," the creature whispered, its voice becoming more distorted, more fragmented as it stepped closer. "The hunger will grow. You will need to feed, like the others." Suddenly, memories flooded my mind. Faces, those I had seen before and those I hadn't. Tom, Lisa, Chris. Their eyes, their lifeless, hollow eyes, staring at me from the shadows. I could hear their voices now, distant and muffled, like they were calling to me, urging me to join them. But the hunger was stronger. It was pulling me toward something, toward them. "No!" I shouted, finally breaking free of the paralysis that had bound me. I struggled against the darkness, against the pull of the transformation, but it was futile. The hunger was overwhelming, and with it came the understanding of what I had to do. I had to feed. I didn't know how long I had been there, trapped in that abyss, but I knew one thing now. I wasn't going to escape. The woods had claimed me. The others had claimed me. I could feel them behind me, around me. I wasn't alone anymore. They were waiting for me to join them. And as I felt the first surge of hunger rise up inside me, I knew that there was no turning back. I had become one of them, and I would never leave the woods. Not alive. I felt it in my bones. The hunger was no longer just a gnawing ache, but a searing, burning need that consumed me. Every instinct, every rational thought was drowned by this overwhelming urge. I knew now that I couldn't fight it. I had become something else, something twisted, something that belonged in the darkness, in the woods. As I stood there, trembling and broken, I could hear them, the others, gathering around me. They had been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to cross the final line, the final step into the abyss. Their hollow eyes followed me, hungry, eager for what I had become. I stumbled forward, barely able to comprehend the chaos of my thoughts. My body was moving on its own, and though I tried to resist, my limbs obeyed the pull of the hunger. My mouth watered, but not with thirst. No, this wasn't thirst. It was something darker, something worse. the need to tear, to consume. And then, as if summoned by my thoughts, a shape appeared in front of me. Person. Human. It was a girl. Her eyes wide with terror, her body trembling as she took a step back. She was a camper just like I had been. A part of me screamed to stop, to run, to save her from what I had become. But there was no going back. I wasn't Jack anymore. I wasn't the man who had arrived at that camp, full of naive hope and desire for a quiet weekend. I was something else. The creature that had spoken to me earlier, the one who had explained the truth of the woods, stepped up beside me. "Go ahead," it said, its voice rasping, as if it were savoring the moment. "This is how it begins. This is how it's always been. The hunger feeds the others. We are the woods." I couldn't answer. I couldn't form words. I could only hear the screaming, the desperate cries of the girl before me. But they didn't matter anymore. I stepped forward, and I heard her scream again, louder this time, as my hands gripped her, as I dragged her toward the shadowed woods. In that instant, a dark, twisted wave of realization crashed over me. I was not just taking her. I was being taken. I had become the thing that hunted, the thing that roamed the darkness of the woods, the thing that devoured souls. It was my turn now, and as I sunk my teeth into her flesh, I felt it. The power, the relief, the completion. I had finally fed. I had become one of them. The girl's struggles faded quickly, her screams fading into the night like so many before her. The hunger had been satisfied, for now. I stood over her, blood on my hands, and as I looked around, I realized the truth. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. The others were all around me, waiting, watching, hungry, and I knew now in my very bones that I would never leave. I would never escape. Not physically, not mentally. I was part of the woods, part of the never-ending cycle of darkness and hunger that had claimed all those before me. There was no escape, no salvation, only the woods, and the others, and the hunger. And as the last remnants of the girl disappeared into the darkness, I let myself become one with them, part of the woods. And now I wait for the next one,